You are statistically more likely to get hurt driving to see one of these animals than from an actual encounter with it. That number stops mattering the second you're standing in the water and something below the surface has already made a decision about you, or the second your foot lands 3 inches from where something has been resting quietly all morning. Saltwater crocodile. The saltwater crocodile is the largest living reptile on Earth, and the open ocean was never a boundary it bothered respecting. Found across Southeast Asia, Northern Australia, and the Indo-Pacific, Crocodilus porosus has been tracked hundreds of kilometers offshore, moving between islands with no apparent concern for depth or distance. Riding currents the way most reptiles ride, a warm rock, it generates a bite force of roughly 3,700 pounds per square inch, the highest ever recorded in a living animal. But the bite isn't actually the part that should worry you. It's the waiting. Submerged, heart rate slowed to near stillness, holding position for hours while the surface above shows nothing. No ripple, no silhouette, nothing to suggest nearly 1,000 kilograms of muscle and patience is sitting a few feet below where you're standing. Most documented attacks happen during completely routine shoreline activity. Washing hands, filling a water container, letting a dog near the bank. Not reckless behavior, because the crocodile was never provoked. It was already there before you showed up. And it will still be there long after you've decided the water looks calm enough. Today, Komodo Dragon. For decades, the accepted explanation was that Komodo dragon bites killed through infection. Dirty mouths packed with bacteria that turned any wound septic within days. A story repeated in documentaries and textbooks for most of the 20th century. In 2009, researchers dissected a Komodo dragon's skull and found something that textbooks hadn't accounted for at all. Actual venom glands, producing a mix of more than 60 toxic proteins that lower blood pressure, prevent clotting, and induce shock. Native to only a handful of Indonesian islands, Varanus komodoensis reaches nearly 3 meters and hunts by ambush. And the bite doesn't need to be especially deep because the venom finishes the job over the following hours, dropping prey like deer or water buffalo into shock while the dragon simply waits nearby, unhurried, occasionally checking back on something it wounded a day earlier. Roughly 24 attacks on humans have been documented across recorded history, most involving villagers on the islands. The dragons still roam freely, where fences are more of a suggestion than a barrier. Most people never go anywhere near where that number gets tested, which is precisely why the myth about dirty teeth survived as long as it did. Eastern brown snake. The eastern brown snake looks almost apologetic, thin and plain, easy to mistake for something sunning itself harmlessly on a suburban path or curled at the edge of a garden bed. It accounts for roughly 41% of identified snakebite victims in Australia between 2005 and 2015, with 15 recorded deaths from fewer than 300 confirmed in a fatality rate that outpaces every other species on the continent by a wide margin. Its venom yield is tiny, around 4 milligrams on average, a fraction of what some far less dangerous snakes produce. But the potency makes up the difference entirely, disrupting blood clotting so severely that death can occur in under 30 minutes without treatment. It doesn't need speed or volume the way some of the animals on this list do. It just needs you to be barefoot in your own backyard, reaching for a hose or moving a pile of firewood. And across most of eastern Australia, that's exactly where it lives. Close enough to lawns and driveways that most people who die from one never saw it as a threat until it already was. Fer-de-Lance. The Fer-de-Lance causes more deaths across Central and South America than any other species on the continent, without carrying any single record-breaking statistic to explain it. No fastest strike, no highest venom yield, nothing that would put it at the top of a chart. What makes it dangerous is proximity. It thrives in coffee plantations, banana farms, and the same overgrown paths rural communities walk every single day on the way to work. And unlike a lot of snakes, it doesn't retreat when people show up nearby. Its venom is hemotoxic, destroying tissue and disrupting clotting, badly enough that survivors frequently deal with permanent scarring, chronic pain, or limb loss, even when the bite itself doesn't kill them. Named for the spearhead shape of its head, it gives almost no warning before it strikes. No rattle, no hiss, nothing to signal that the leaf pile someone just stepped near has already reacted. This isn't a rare, exotic threat confined to remote jungle. It's a daily one, for millions of people who never chose to live near it and have no real way to avoid it entirely. King Cobra. The king cobra is the longest, venomous snake alive, capable of stretching past 5 meters, and it's the only snake on Earth known to build an actual nest out of leaf litter, guarding it with an aggression herpetologists routinely describe as maternal, something almost no other reptile bothers doing. Its name, Ophiophagus hana translates to snake eater because its main diet is other snakes, including venomous ones. It tracks through dense undergrowth with a patience that looks almost deliberate. Gram for gram, its venom isn't even the most potent one on this list. Nowhere close. In fact, what makes a bite so dangerous is volume. A single strike carries enough neurotoxin to kill an elephant, and that dose is the entire weapon. A brute force approach that doesn't need finesse when there's simply that much venom behind it. When it rears up, it can reach chest height on an adult human, spread its hood, and hold eye contact for a long, uncomfortable stretch before deciding what happens next. Black Mamba. The black mamba isn't black. Its body is gray-brown, built to vanish into dry savanna and cracked earth, and the only true black on it is inside its mouth, which it opens wide as a warning before anything else happens. A flash of dark against pale gums that witnesses describe as looking less like an animal and more like an opening into something. It's the fastest snake alive, capable of hitting 20 kilometers an hour in short bursts. Fast enough to match a sprinting adult across open ground, and it rarely stops at one bite. Some documented encounters record up to 12 consecutive strikes, each one delivering fresh venom into a nervous system that's already losing the argument. Left untreated, fatality approaches 100%, with death arriving somewhere between 7 and 15 hours later, the body shutting down one system at a time in a slow, borrowed countdown. What gets left out of most retellings is that it isn't aggressive by nature. Nearly every recorded unprovoked attack traces back to an animal that was cornered or startled first. Defending a nest or a retreat path, it had no other way to protect. Inland Taipan, the most venomous snake on the planet, has killed, across all of recorded history, close to nobody. It lives in the remote Channel Country of Central Australia, a landscape so isolated and unvisited that the species disappeared from scientific records for almost a century, before being rediscovered in 1972. Described once and then essentially forgotten. Its venom carries the highest LD50 toxicity ever measured in a snake, with a single bite theoretically capable of killing around 100 adult humans, a number that sounds almost fictional until you realize the math behind it is straightforward, and yet it's remarkably shy, avoiding confrontation to an almost comical degree for an animal carrying that much lethal potential. Every recorded bite has involved a herpetologist handling it directly under research conditions, and every one of them survived with millions of years spent perfecting the deadliest venom on Earth, pointed exclusively at rats, in a place almost nobody ever visits, making it one of the most efficient weapons in nature that has essentially never been fired at anything that could tell the story. Afterward, puff adder. The puff adder doesn't have the fastest strike, the most toxic venom, or the longest fangs of any snake in Africa, and it's still responsible for more snakebite deaths on the continent than any other species combined. The reason has nothing to do with biology and everything to do with temperament. It's thick, slow-moving, extremely common across sub-Saharan Africa, and when approached, it often simply doesn't bother leaving. It stays exactly where it is, hissing and inflating its body as a warning. And if that warning gets ignored or missed entirely, which happens constantly on footpaths at dusk, it strikes. A single bite can deliver anywhere from 100 to 300 milligrams of cytotoxic venom, tissue-destroying rather than neurological, and around 100 milligrams is already enough to be fatal. Death, when it happens, tends to arrive slowly, sometimes over a full day, through blood loss and tissue breakdown rather than anything fast or dramatic. In parts of South Africa, it accounts for roughly 60% of all recorded snakebites on its own, more than every cobra, mamba, and viper on the continent combined. Green anaconda. The green anaconda doesn't need venom, because it solved the same problem a completely different way. Found across the swamps and rivers of the Amazon and Orinoco basins, a large female can exceed 5 meters and weigh more than 200 kilograms, with eyes positioned on top of her head, so she can lie almost entirely submerged and still track everything moving along the bank. For a long time, people assumed constriction worked by suffocation, slowly cutting off air until the lungs simply gave up. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Biology found something faster and considerably more brutal happening instead. Constriction shuts down circulation almost immediately, and in lab trials, a prey animal's heart rate dropped by half within 60 seconds of being gripped, with blood pressure collapsing nearly sixfold by the time the process ended. The anaconda isn't waiting for you to stop breathing. It's waiting for your heart to fail, which happens considerably faster, and considerably before most people would expect anything close to death to already be underway. Wikipedia Uno Gustave. Gustave isn't a species. He's one individual Nile crocodile, documented by French naturalist Patrice Fay, estimated to have killed over 300 people along Lake Tanganyika and the Rusizi River in Burundi over the course of several decades. He's thought to exceed 6 meters by observational estimate, carries 3 bullet scars and a missing chunk of shoulder from something that never finished the job, and he has never once been captured, despite years of dedicated effort. Fay built an elaborate floating trap using live bait, watched it for weeks, and Gustave eventually approached it, studied it carefully from a distance, and left without triggering it. His last confirmed sighting was in 2015. Every other animal on this list is a pattern, something you can study, generalize about, and reduce to averages and probabilities. Gustave is a face researchers recognize the moment they see it again, a specific set of scars and behaviors belonging to one animal that has, by every account, made a series of individual decisions about specific people over the course of his life. Boomslang. In September 1957, Carl Schmidt, one of the most respected herpetologists in the world, was bitten by a juvenile boomslang while examining it for identification purposes. He wrote about it in his diary with total clinical calm, noted mild symptoms over the following hours, and went to bed that night, confident he'd taken a survivable dose based on decades of accepted science, classifying the species as essentially harmless to people. By morning, he was dead. The venom is hemotoxic in a way that destroys the blood's ability to clot at all, causing bleeding from the gums, eyes, and internal tissue simultaneously, a slow, systemic collapse rather than anything sudden. Schmidt kept documenting his own decline in careful, methodical notes right up until his body stopped agreeing with what he'd written down hours earlier, a final record left behind by a man who trusted the science. He'd spent his career building saw-scaled viper. You've probably never heard of it, and there's a real chance it's killed more people than any other snake alive, more than the cobras, more than the mambas, more than anything with a reputation to match. It's small, rarely longer than 60 centimeters, and unremarkable to look at, spread across a corridor running from West Africa through the Middle East into the Indian subcontinent, exactly where agricultural communities have worked barefoot in the same fields for generations, without any real alternative. Before striking, it rubs its scales together into a dry rasping sound that people in affected regions learn to recognize the way city dwellers recognize a car horn, a warning that comes right before something goes badly wrong. It isn't the deadliest snake, biologically, not close. It kills more people because its range overlaps with dense populations, inconsistent antivenom access, and hospitals that are sometimes hours away by roads that barely qualify as roads. A fact about geography and infrastructure, dressed up as a fact about venom. 12 animals, 12 completely different reasons any of this happens, and the same overlooked fact sitting behind every single one of them. Not one of these species evolved with humans in mind. The venom, the bite force, the patience, the sheer volume of a strike. All of it was solving a problem millions of years before we ever showed up standing in the wrong river, the wrong field, or the wrong patch of grass, at exactly the wrong moment. Drop a like if this changed which one of these you're actually scared of now, and subscribe if you want the next deep dive. Comment which reptile deserves its own full episode.